So welcome to session 5. Now, if you remember in the last session, we talked about how to make a business case, return on investment case to prove to our boss and our colleagues in HR that HRIS itself is a great idea as an investment. And we talked about how to save the money through HRIS rather than make money for the organization. And we used one big example related to absenteeism. And when you read the HRS toolkit, you'll see that there's a lot of other two big ones and a few small examples you can use to, in fact, prove that you can generate a lot of savings because of an HRIS investment. So let's say your boss agreed to it, your colleagues are all okay to go with it. The next step is to do a needs analysis. Now, in this session, we're going to talk about just that. We're going to start the needs analysis process, the document, and talk about the data dictionary as an important component, and also something around security and privacy. So let's get right into it. A needs analysis is a document. And I highly recommend you do this as a document and not just do it in your head. Because HRIS, in fact, has to be purchased and implemented to meet as many needs of HR as possible. Every little intricate, minute need that you might have. Now, I have never met any HR person, no matter how seasoned, who can articulate every single need. There's always something somebody does that somebody else doesn't know. So it is very important to interview various people in HR, look at the work they do, look at the reports they produce, the documents they have, and write down every little thing that they might need today. And also, don't forget, have an appendix of future needs as well. So, for example, you might not be doing training and development right now, but it might be part of your strategy, so it's a good idea to document that as a feature you might need. So either you purchase an HRIS today that has it, or you can at least find out if it's scalable or customizable. Now, I'm going to make this simple for you. Needs analysis document has to just be in plain words, literally, section by section. For example, the first section is a data dictionary. I'll show you how to do it. Plain words, as simple as possible. And the idea is that when you have a document, that, by the way, could range in size from 10, 20 pages to 300 pages, depending on the complexity of what your needs are. Once you have that document, the idea is you can now use it as a detailed checklist to compare various systems and vendors out there against your needs. Or better, if you're going to have a fully custom system developed for you, programmed for you, then the programmers will have to have some document to go around what you need. And listen, the analogy is building a house. Some of us have a need in a house or a home, let's say, that you can document in a few pages. Some of us can dream up a house or a home where you can document all the needs in hundreds of pages. You all don't need intricate, complicated electronics and swimming pools and jacuzzis and different fancy appliances. But if you were to, you would start documenting them. And in fact, as a mental exercise for you, go home and think about your dream house. And just mentally, you don't have to write this down. Just think of all the needs you have. Now remember, the needs are subjective and objective. For example, square footage would be objective. Number of bedrooms would be objective. But some of the subjective elements might be the location, proximity to shopping and schools, the setting, the aesthetics of a park nearby or the neighborhood itself, rules, regulations around in the municipality, prestige. But then I bet you any money as you're doing this and I look at this document, there's going to be some things that you will miss. You will not have the expertise, something like the number of amperes of power coming in, which is variant on, it's dependent on how many appliances you're going to have. How much pressure of water do you need? Well, it depends on how much water you're going to use. You wouldn't know some of these things, right? And then, of course, building code, things such and such. So we have other people on our team like architects and electricians and plumbers and etc., builders, who can advise us on that. So an HRIS needs analysis is very similar. You just start documenting everything. Now, listen, I told you earlier, I'm going to tell you again. Not all of you are going to do this in HR. Maybe you'll go to a company that's already done this. But remember, it's always worthwhile in HR to know how somebody else approached anything at any level. because then you will have an appreciation, but you end up learning a lot. For example, the first item, data dictionary. It's a tedious thing to do. I get it. But the person who's ever done a data dictionary for an HR department is the one person who knows so much intricate details about how things work and what they are than anybody else. Because you're the one cataloging things for the first time. Here, let me show you, okay? So, cover page, table of contents for needs analysis, maybe a little paragraph explaining what's in it. And then the first big heading is data dictionary. You go look around HR and you ask, what functions do we do now? So in a table, remember you're doing this in Word, right? So you make a nice table, 3 columns, function, field, and definition. And you write down all the things you're doing in HR right now, functions. You must know there must be people doing it. And if you're not doing it, something like T&D, let's say, or benefits admin, then write it down in a future appendix that I might need this in the future. So then you go to the people that are doing all of this, and you give them a few weeks to accomplish this task, right? You give them some blank paper, and you ask them, can you detail and outline every little single piece of data, information that you are responsible for, that you use? And they'll come back with a few here and there. You say, no, take it back, go back to all your documents, all your reports, and look. And you'll be surprised how many there are. In fact, the system that we're going to look at, Super HR, has about 1,200 plus different unique fields or pieces of data that it can hold. A typical HR department, though, won't have obviously all of it. Will have 600 to 700 different things in HR. And if I were to ask you to list 600 or 700 different things, you wouldn't be able to. Look, your driver's license alone, take out your driver's license and look at it. Every little piece of information on it, including the picture and the barcode and your signature. Imagine each one has to have a box on a screen, on a system that needs to be filled in somehow. There's like over 20 things on your driver's license, 18 at least, I know. So have a look. Not only am I going to write the functions down, you put them in order of importance, priority. For example, if you were going to buy an HR system for one thing and one thing only, what would it be? Salary admin, let's say. For some people, it might be time management, attendance, absenteeism. And what's the second most important? What's the third most important? So you go to the salary admin person or people and ask them to start writing the fields. And you end up with the list that looks something like this. Now, obviously, it's going to be a lot more than this, right? And certain things that they put on the list, like the person's name or their job ID or their department or their supervisor's name, those I think would be common for everybody. So you can have a common kind of table as well. But something unique to salary admin, they want a system that has a box that has a name in it. They want a system that has a box where you can type in pay and a hire date and a job ID. So I'll give you perspective. A pay is not just one box where you type in person's pay, hourly or salaried, but next to it is a small box that says period, which means is it annual, is it hourly, is it weekly? And then next to that would be the date the pay changed. Next to it would be the next date the pay will change. Below it might be the previous pay. And then next to that would be the percentage increase. You see, so pay alone, you could look at as 8, 10 different things. And now pay, if pay includes things like cost of living allowance and merit and performance pay and so on, different elements, you'd have more boxes for that. Now you'll see this firsthand, okay? If you want to see now, go look at the Super HR videos, you'll see just how many boxes there are. So you continue that on for every functional area of HR. Whoever's doing it will fill it in. And then this is the tedious part. For each field, you're going to write somewhat of a definition, which looks something like this. Now here's the idea. If you're going to buy an HR system, remember a screen that you log into, right? And there's a box called name. You want that box called name to be able to fit exactly what you want to fit into it. I mean, you've all seen this. You go on the internet, you try to fill some stuff in, and it won't accept what you're trying to fill in because somebody has defined it to only allow certain things. So I can get a system right now that has a name field A field is a box on a screen that is only 20 characters big, or 25. So when you have hyphenated names or a lot of foreign names that are big, as an example, Lucille, McGillicuddy, Dash, Ricardo, that's not going to fit. So if you bought a system where the name won't fit, it chops off at the end, well, it's too bad. And legally, you can't change Lucille to Lucy. So identify it today. What's the longest name you're going to have? Now, some names have a dash, so write there that I need to have a dash in there. At my law firm, we had to have brackets inside senior partners or any partner's names. So allow for brackets. You might want French character sets or German character sets. Ask for it. Now, doesn't mean you're going to get it. You might not find a system that can accommodate it, but at least you can say, okay, I tried to get it, and then I could live without it. I could change the way I do things. Or, in most cases or many cases, the vendor that sells you the HRIS might look at this and say, I will customize that for you. In fact, at the brewery, the big brewery that I work for, had as a client, they actually needed French. And they paid X number of thousands of dollars, and just for them, it was customized. You press a button, and it puts French characters inside the text. How it did it, I don't know. Our programmers took care of it. Now look at pay. I'm going to have a box called pay. It's going to be 14 digits. That's good enough for up to about $10 million. 10 million less 1 penny. I want 2 decimals, and I want to be able to convert to US dollars. My dates are going to be month, day, year, and nothing else. I have job IDs. Job IDs that look like 2 letters, dash, 3 numbers. So let's say AD-054 would be administrative job 54. So count them. I want hyphens in between. I want maybe you might special characters. I don't know. So here's a little field that the salary admin people use that you would have no clue about. You will, because you're taking compensation. It's called a compar ratio, or comparative ratio, or normative ratio. And typically it looks like 5 characters with the percent sign and 2 decimals, or 2 decimals and a percent sign. So it looks something like 89.24%. Now, imagine you missed that little compar ratio, right? You wouldn't have known. How would you have known? You would forget. But the people using it, they know. It's powerful for them. So I'm going to use that as an example because I do have a story for you. And it was a company. This is years about, I guess, 11, 12 years ago. No, maybe longer. I don't know. I forget. But they had an implementation that was, I think, $250,000, which is a lot of money for the company. So they had a person in HRIS who they hired, recent graduate. But unfortunately, although they knew a lot of things, they also brought with them the attitude that I'm going to do this all by myself. I don't want to involve people because I know so much. And if I involve people, they might steal it from me. Remember, the person was junior, entry-level kind of thing, but took on the challenge nevertheless. By the way, never have that attitude. Always get people involved, because nobody's going to steal your idea. I mean, they might, I don't know, but don't fear that. But anyway, so this person did a pretty good, they did good business case, ROI. Everyone was convinced. They managed to get everybody motivated and excited about a brand new HRIS. Now it's going to revolutionize how we do things. And it was supposed to. And the person thought they did a pretty good needs analysis. And if you looked at it, it was pretty thorough. Quite thorough. They were quite proud of it. And then they did a proper market. They went out to market, researched different systems, purchased the right one for $250,000. And then, here's the beauty of it, they implemented it over 6 months very well. Everyone got training slowly, gradually on a custom plan. Everything was input. Everything was audited and double-checked. Oh, it was beautiful implementation. So fully implemented within a year, $250,000. And then about 8 months after that, people are using it. And you notice everybody's happy with it. It's like amazing. Everything was supposed to go beautifully. This company was poised to do on very high-end strategic work because of HRIS and save tons of money. But about 8 months later, the salary admin specialist, a person, went to the HRIS person, this guy, and asked, by the way, I'm looking through the system and I can't find my compa ratio. So the HRIS person goes, compa what? They had no clue. They might have learned it in school, but something they forgot. Because if you don't use it, you don't know what it is. And the guy goes through the entire system, can't find it. Looks through the help thing, can't find it. Even called the vendor and asked, where the heck's your comp ratio? And the vendor looked back at the original needs analysis document that they signed off on. Remember, you check off each field. Yes, we have it. No, we don't. And they themselves said, well, hang on. You never showed comp ratio as a need, and we never said we had it. Look through all the brochures, all the literature. We never had it in our system. Our system doesn't have a box called comp ratio for whatever reason. So he gets desperate. He was belligerent at first to the vendor. Then he gets desperate, says, look, we'll pay you. Can you build it in? And the guy goes, look, the vendor goes, to build it in, it's not a difficult calculation. It's simply a person's salary, annual salary, divided by their midpoint of their pay range. So you'll learn all about this in compensation. But the intricacy and complication of programming it was too much for the vendor. They said, look, we're a generic system. We can do it, but if we do this change for you, every other client wants to make changes. So some vendors do. They take your money and then they'll do it for you, and it's awesome. It's great. But this vendor said no. So the HRIS person said, okay, fine. They went to the salary administration specialist and said, okay, I can't get it for you. I'm sorry, it's not there. What were you doing for the last 20, 30 years? So the salary admin person explained it. They go, we're doing it manually, right? They had, over 8,000 employees. Groups of employees were put into job clusters, right, around pay ranges. And what they had to do for 8,000 employees, they had to equitably and fairly decide on pay increases for the next year. Now, you won't believe this. There was a team of 3 people, maybe 4, 3 or 4 people, working full-time, solid 12-hour days for 3 months. 3 months every year just to come up with the pay amount for next year. And that was one of the sellers of getting an HRIS, was it would streamline things like that. Right? So the HRS guy goes, we can't get it. Can you go back to the old way of doing it? And salary admin says, no problem. We will. So HRS is somewhat okay, says, okay, salary admin's down, but at least everybody else is happy with the system. Well, not so much. Because when salary admin does not use the system, perfectly good system otherwise, then benefits can no longer use it. And if those two don't use it, payroll can no longer connect. And then other people start losing faith and confidence in it, and they stop using it. So within a year and a half or so, a little bit more, they had to scrap the entire system. It's a story, I know it sounds kind of weird, but it was $250,000 down the tubes. Now, the company could come up with that money again for other system, but the confidence of the HR department, it'll take years to get it back because they just want to move on to their work, do it the old way, right? It's a story I called A Little Box Called Comp Ratio Killed $250,000, right? Now, normally, I could explain to you what comp ratio is and all that. That's compensation. They'll explain it. So even the smallest obscure box is important to identify. So when you have this document, you're going to feel so good about it. You're going to know things, so many things, because 2 things. You're documenting it. You get to ask questions, and you get to meet the actual people that are doing the job. So if your boss in your first job says, hey, what would you like to do today? Tell them this. Just to document it. Why not? So that's our first need for today. Now, another need we probably have, I believe that you believe it, is security. Right? We must have a need for security. You lock your door in your office, don't you? If you have filing cabinets, you probably lock those as well, because keep one thing in mind and never forget this. The data, the information that you, HR, are responsible for is the most secret, sensitive data in any organization. More secretive than your industrial secrets, your engineering, your finances, because it's about people. Right? Think about it. So obviously, if you're going to have locks and keys and elements of trust, then when you put all that data into a computer, digitize it, then you also need security, but the security changes from a key to a username password. Now here's the beauty of electronic security versus keys. Keys can be lost, people can break the door. The good thing is if somebody carries out files, you can always physically notice they're taking files out. But on a computer, you can save things, you can print on paper, put it in your pocket. There's all sorts of weird stuff you can do. And again, it depends on the culture of trust in your organization. So for example, if you're the only one in HR, you probably don't need heavy duty security. You can either get into the system or not. You have 2 or 3 people, maybe you trust more people. If you have 8, 9, 10 to 20 people, you probably need a lot of security. Right? Now, in my opinion, digital security is a lot better than physical security like keys and doors, because a computer keeps logs and it could restrict you quickly. It can flag things. It can alert other people. So if you went and tried to change somebody's pay and you weren't authorized, first of all, it's not going to let you. If you manage to log in with somebody else's account, it'll trace it right back to the machine you're sitting at. Right? And so in large companies, there are people monitoring all of this. So when you read my notes in the HRIS toolkit, you'll notice that the levels of security you can buy on an HRIS, there's 5 of them, they're listed right there. And then you attach different levels to different people like you see there. And the more you have, the more it costs. So gateway is just simple. It's your user ID and your password. Function is when we restrict what parts of HR you can look at. Like I'll only give you access to health and safety data. You can't look at salary data. You have access to benefits and some salary data, and so on. Then once I give you access to certain functions, what can you do to it? Can you just look at it? So my assistant maybe can just look at things, not add or change or delete. But the boss maybe can add, change, delete, and view. That's called action. I could even restrict to the groups of people you can look at. So for example, if you're at a large corporation, I could give you access to only employees in your office or your region and nobody else. And the higher up you go, the more levels of access, the more groups of people you can access. And the most intricate one is field. It's where you give access to somebody to look at a screen, but that one field, that one box, you're not allowed to see, like date of birth. Only some people can see it. So that would be called field level, okay? Now, in some cases, you might find an awesome system, a really good HR system that doesn't have all of the security. And then what you have to do is you have to change your culture of trust, meaning authorize additional people to have access to it, but then also tell them that you are not to violate anything you see. In any case, don't go into those records. And you always make them sign an NDA, a non-disclosure agreement. So read the notes, because what I really want to get into are protections for people around privacy. I mean, it's enough to suggest that privacy of individuals is important. I think we all understand that. We take our privacy seriously. And it's become more of a deal recently because of internet. But do governments ever step in and say, wait, whoa, we don't trust you? Yeah, of course they do. Even we haven't ironed that out yet. The privacy around the world is different. I mean, you've heard of hackers and pirates and people have disregard for privacy, Panama Papers and Wiki and this and that. So governments step in and they say, hang on, now we're going to put strong protections on privacy. And they still get violated, but less so. Now, I'm going to talk just briefly about 2 because I think your law course will also talk about this. But we'll talk about FIPPA, F-I-P-P-A, and we'll talk about PEPEDA, P-I-P-E-D-A, just briefly. So FIPPA is an older law, 1950s. I'm going to talk from the Ontario perspective. It is provincial, but every province has a version of this. And this is a general one, but there's other ones for healthcare, other ones for police services, military has its own, teachers probably have their own, I'm not sure. So just listen to the essence, okay? FIPPA is Freedom of Information, that's one part, and Protection of Privacy Act. Now, Freedom of Information is the part where it says if anybody wants access to the data that you're keeping about them, whether you're an employer, a hospital, a school, a doctor, whatever, or the government, that they can officially request this information from you. You can't hold it back. Right? Even media, but media can rarely access information about an individual. Now, if you're going to have employees do that, which is rare, I mean, I hardly hear any stories there, if any, then don't make the process so easy. You have to make the person fill out a form to request their information. You have to wait a few days. You have to book a private room for them to view it, photocopy their records or print them out, never the originals. And before they look at their file, make sure in front of them you initial every single page, numbered, and they initial it too, so they got it. There's proof that both of you agreed you got all the pages. And then when the person's done and they give back that copy, you initial, both of you, that you got all the paper back. So there's your proof that the employee in fact had access to all of it. Because if you missed anything, and let's face it, this is probably going to a lawyer, a lawsuit. If you miss giving anything, then of course a judge is going to have a problem with it. You have to disclose everything. I mean, me personally, I'm just in the habit of anytime you put anything in an employee's file, you copy them on it. There should be no secrets. Now, if the employee blabs that information to somebody else, that's not your violation, that's theirs. So that's the freedom of information part. The second part, the protection of privacy, that's the more important part, okay? Now, I boiled it down for you in a simple sentence. It basically says you cannot, you being HR, cannot disclose information about an individual, the employee, without their prior consent, permission. Now, I put the word written in there because quite often it is written. You do have to fill out a form, sign it. But sometimes it's just email. Sometimes it's verbal. It depends on your culture of trust. Now, any lawyer will always say take it as a written statement, a form that you have that the person fills out. Now, we have to go over, though, who that other person might be, that other entity. You cannot disclose information about an individual, your employee, to who? Well, common scenarios would be a bank. Employee applies for a mortgage. The bank calls you to verify employment. I mean, somebody calls you to verify employment and they say they're from a bank? How do you know? And why would you answer any questions? I'll tell you how to do it. First of all, you find out who this person is. You verify with the bank that they in fact work for the bank. And then second is when they ask you questions like, okay, this employee, what did they do? How much did they make? How long were they there? What was their performance rating? How many dependents do they have? Well, as soon as they start asking questions that are not relevant to a bank mortgage, you say, I'm not going to answer that. And how would you know? If you don't know, you will after experience. You ask other people in your department. You don't have to hire a lawyer for this. This could be happening once a day. But here's the thing. Don't ever give information. Only verify it. Remember, the employee wrote something on an application with the bank. They can read it out, and you could say yes or no. Right? Now, another situation could be another employer. So the employee or ex-employee, former employee, applies to another company. And generally, if you wrote down my company as an employer on your resume, it's implied consent that I could contact that previous employer. And if I do, you would have been smart to have at least one or two good managers ready to vouch for you. Because quite often employees do get let go and they were bad employees. But sometimes the bosses were bad and maybe it was discriminatory and they let the employee go. They're never going to say anything good about a good person. So in any case, if another employer calls you for a reference, I'll tell you what your lawyer is going to say today. Don't do it. Just simple, yes, they work for me, period, done, bye. But then references get boring. So in any case, you would only verify documentation, anything that was documented, only verify yes and no. And always verify who the other person is that's calling you. Because it could be telemarketers trying to dig data, dig information about people, right? You don't know. It could be somebody out to do harm. You don't know this. So find out who it is. There's services that do that, agencies that do that. And then only verify, yes, they work for me for this long. Yes, that's a job they did. If you had a clear performance review system, That's a judgment call, right? Some things that you shouldn't answer. If they ask how many dependents did they have, well, it's none of your business. How much money did they make? Well, I don't know. I won't disclose that. You pay them what you want to pay. I paid them what I mean, you got to use your judgment, right? Now, another scenario. What if a police officer comes to your office in a uniform and asks for the employee's file because they're working on a case? Well, I mean, sure, you want to help. That's your civic duty. Don't get intimidated. You're not allowed to. Are you going to ask the employee if they can disclose? I mean, if they committed a crime, of course they're going to say no. So even law enforcement other than national defense, they need a judge's order. A judge, I think. And that's a case where you have to call a lawyer and find out. But you do not get intimidated by anybody. What if a manager of an employee, let's say a vice president of an employee, comes to you and says, I want this employee's file? Ooh, now it's tough. Because you don't want to stand up like that to a senior manager. You have to use your judgment. You have to ask, sir, what's the purpose of your need to know this person's birth date and address? And they go, I'm just doing some review on my employees. They know, listen, sir, I can give you attendance data, training data, performance data. What would you like? But if they come and say, I kind of like her, I want to send her flowers on her birthday, you got to kind of say, look, we'll arrange to send the flowers, or you ask her yourself. Okay? So it's very simple what the essence of FIPPA is. Now, I got to tell you, and I'll repeat this again, you might not be directly covered. If you're a private corporation, you probably are not covered legally by FIPPA. That's not the point. The point is the essence of FIPPA, the essence of PEPEDA, you must respect. Because people can still sue you in a civil court, right? Now let's talk about PEPEDA. That's relatively new, and it applies to everything and everybody in Canada. By the way, these laws are not just workplace. These are 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, everywhere. So PEPEDA is relatively new, around 20 years, some odd years old. Now, it's pan-Canadian, which means it's run by the federal government in Ottawa, but it applies to every jurisdiction, provincial, municipal, you name it. Got it? Now, PEPEDA doesn't go... everything that FIPPA does, sure, it's fine. It doesn't cover freedom of information. But here's what it does. It's almost like research ethics here. It says, now, wait, hold on. You can't. Let's not worry about privacy yet. Let's worry about what data you're collecting in the first place. So what is it you're collecting? It doesn't say what you can collect. It's saying, is what you're collecting bona fide? Does it have a purpose? A business purpose? And what is that purpose? So that forces you now to go look at every single document, every form, every question that you would ever ask your employees that you're documenting the answers to. And you're going to wonder, why am I asking this? Because there's some old application forms that have stuff on it, and you're saying, well, we never use this. You can't collect it then. Interview questions people ask with low relevance questions. But once you establish that everything you're doing is bona fide, and by the way, don't forget, also notices that you post, any information that you post on the walls or in public bulletins, all that needs to be cleared as well to make sure that other people are allowed to see it. It's one of the reasons we don't post your marks on a wall. Remember the old days? You walk up to a wall and look up your mark? We don't do that. Anyways, once you have bona fide purpose, you have to state that purpose to your employees, the respondents, the people who are going to give you the data, either on paper, electronically, verbally, doesn't matter. You're asking for data about a person. They need to be aware of why you're collecting it. They might not care. In fact, in my experience, most people never ask. They just give you the information. And then once they are informed of the purpose, then they can give you the consent. And then there's variations of, consent with duress or under pressure. Did they give it to you because they couldn't speak the language, they didn't understand? What was it? Did you threaten them? Was it, did you say, oh, we're deciding your pay, you better do it now? No, that's duress. So you collect the information. But PEPEDA goes further and says, hold on, collect it, use it. It's bona fide, no problem. But you can't keep it forever. because they finally realized that documents are now electronic, so electronic documents. And they not only include paper documents and digital documents like PDFs, emails, but also video, audio, recordings, images, photos. That's why we have fewer and fewer cameras recording people in public places, because privacy rights get violated, right? So at some point in an information privacy policy, you've heard about these, the little fine print that nobody ever reads, either on a website or on the form itself, you have to let people know how the data is going to be stored, assure them of security, how long you're going to keep it, and then some people might be interested, very rare, how you will actually destroy it. You're going to shred it? What type of a shredder? What service? Are you going to burn it? You're going to demagnetize it? You're going to throw it in the blue box? No. See, it forces you to think about all of this stuff. Now, in terms of how long, this is a difficult one because, in the old days, we just keep the data forever. And in some cases, you can. Like medical records in Ontario, 99 years or something, right? Because government can use that for biostatistics purposes into the future. But in a company, if I did a survey today that applies to work I do this year, I have to get rid of it by next year. Ask yourself, how long is this data going to be useful for what I do? And then plan on destroying it. Right? Generally, if an employee quits and leaves, I personally would think it's reasonable to keep their file for upwards of 5 years. Maybe 10. Nobody's going to sue you for it. But you can't say forever. Because within a 10-year period, the same employee might come back to you. Right? And you might want to do historical reports, historical data. Just generally, in general terms. Now, I described both laws for you. I highly recommend that you download. At the least, for all these laws we mentioned, you should be reading the regular public's little brochure on what the essence is. But PEPEDA has a nice tool out there you can download. I think I have it on my Seneca. Just download it. Download any forms associated with any of these laws. Become aware. You don't have to memorize them. In fact, I think that's a great little thing. If your boss ever asks you, so what would you like to do now? Have a list of things ready to tell them that you like. The data dictionary, for example, that's a good one. How about a PEPEDA audit? Where you walk around your factory, your offices, just make sure we're violating things. Are we posting things we're not supposed to? Are we disclosing information in a public place where people could see? Are you singling out information about a person? How are we collecting it? Are there weird questions on a form? What are managers asking their employees? Do some training around it. See, then you evolve into a privacy expert, so to speak. But let me tell you, it's the essence of these laws and the inherent protections that they offer individuals that we must respect. Your lawyer, somebody else might tell you, but these laws don't apply to your jurisdiction, to a private corporation of only 50 employees. You know what? Who cares? You can still get sued for violating those same rights. So just because only government employees have a protection, let's say the law only applies to government, for example, that doesn't mean every other employee does not have the same rights. So you got to respect that. And you know what? Then you get respect back from the employees, because privacy is a thing now. So I think we'll leave it at that. Next session we'll cover some more needs analysis elements. Then we'll move on to actually implementing the system, because I want to move on to HR research in a few weeks, which talks about what do we do when we have everything in place and data and intelligence is just flowing our way. What can we do with it to make our organization that much better?